Hello, everyone. We're back again today for another little kitchen table talk. And it's really rainy outside. So it's one of those days when you just want to lay in bed and just relax. But I'm on a mission. You guys know I'm doing this Groundhog Day challenge. And I'm trying to make sure I stay focused. So even though I wanted to stay in my pajamas all day, and I'm not knocking those who do on days like this. That's just not what I'm going to do because I've got a goal to achieve. So I'm, got my little navy shirt, rocking that. Got my very special necklace here on. And I got my jeans on and I've been working. I've been doing my thing. And a couple of thoughts came to me when I was in the middle of my quiet time because I had a couple of possible, family events and things that came up that were threatening to sort of take my focus and move it. And something has happened, honey, and I'm so happy that it has. And I thought I would talk to you about it today. And I'm calling it the sovereignty shift. Yes. And I'm going to call it the sovereignty shift because it's that moment when you realize that you don't really owe anyone your attention and your time. You finally realize that that's energy that you reserve to put to use the way you see fit. Now, of course, if you're at the mothering stage of life, and you have a lot of responsibilities there. Perhaps you have an elder person living in your home, a parent or an aunt, maybe an older sibling. It could be something like that. And so you're having to navigate that. And that makes sense. But if you're lucky and you're at a point in your life where the kiddies are grown, your parents are either pretty independent or they're resting. They're resting in heaven. They're with God. And you finally have a moment to breathe and be hyper-focused and selfish about where you put your attention. That's really a good thing because you can get a lot of good stuff accomplished when that happens. We have been talking about decision fatigue and how it's real important that you take stock of your attention, your time, your physical energy, and your peace so that you can have, the mental clarity to channel that into places and spaces where you want to channel that energy. And it always seems like when you finally get that focus, the challenge comes, right? Whether it's some type of emergency, the car, or, a unexpected bill, or a family member all of a sudden has something that just really needs your attention, or a friend. And you have to sit back and realize that not every crisis, not every emergency is your crisis. And you have to begin to be very selective about where you choose to place your focus because mental energy, creativity, it is not an endless, always burning resource. Now, it does renew itself every day. But if you keep giving that energy away every day to things that you aren't supposed to be focused on, then you won't have the mental fortitude to do the task that you're supposed to. Now, I was real tempted because there is a situation that's going on in my circles and in one of my circles, and they really needed someone to help out in a pinch and a bind to get a couple of things done and to sort of act as I don't know, like a organizer of the information and to kind of get in there and make sure that information flows and that different people get contacted. And I'm usually pretty good at that stuff despite, having a scattered mind. I have really good systems. And people have begun to realize that, oh, hey, she can really organize projects and get things out and make sure everybody's communicated with. They know that I do that well because of my systems. But this time, I thought about it before I jumped in to help. And that's new for me, because typically I feel a little guilty in the past if I don't help, especially if I know I have a gift or I have a resource or I have a skill that somebody else may need. I typically would feel like it was my obligation to show up or to provide that. But something's changed, and it's really changed since I started this YouTube channel, where I've had to spend a little bit more time with my quiet time in self-reflection. And I've started kind of putting the pieces together and realizing that that is a sneaky strategy that the powers that be will use to get you off your task. Because if I go chasing down and trying to organize and put together this plan and help in this situation, who's going to shoot my YouTube videos? Who's going to finish writing that outline for that course? Who's going to create those slides? And now that I'm coming to understand that our mental capacity only has a certain amount of bandwidth that we get, I think it renews itself daily. Then you burn out and you have to kind of take the whole 2-week, 3-week vacation, and then it can renew itself again. But if every time that resource, that emotional bandwidth renews itself, you let it leak out to other things that you're really not supposed to be doing, you're never going to get your big goals and your big visions done. And I realize that makes a lot of people feel uncomfortable. I am one of those people. That makes me feel uncomfortable, because I start thinking, well, what are they going to say about me? Are they going to think that I'm not a team player? Are they going to think that I'm sitting over here just hating because I don't want to help them? All of that stuff, all that noise. Well, I have been working on trying to develop proper boundaries and trying to get that analytical part of my brain that typically would guilt trip me into doing things that I had no business doing, using up resources that I really didn't have to use. I have been training that side of my brain to be on my side, to be on the side of boundaries. And so now that little inner ringmaster, this is how it sounds. Well, you really should not do that, because you have to do this, that, and the third. You really should tell them no, because that's not going to be something you're going to have time to do and do this other thing that you need to do. And I've been real surprised, because I'm not used to that ringmaster being that loud with that. It's real quick to tell me when I've done something wrong. But this is a new thing where that voice is starting to actually kind of be on my side and speaking when I have time to make the plan. Like typically it'll be a little bit of a feeling like, oh, I don't want to do this. But it'd be louder saying, you better do it. They're going to not like you. They're going to think you're a hater. They're going to think you're not a team player. That was the voice that was louder. But it switched. And so now I'm finding that when I have to set up these boundaries and say, well, I really don't have time to do that because I have a couple other projects and this is just not a good time for me. When I say that ringmaster voice now is starting to say, that's good. Make sure you tell them that you don't have time. And don't tell them you have time next week, because you really don't know. Just say this isn't a good time for you. It's kind of starting to be on my side. And that feels really good. And that tells me a couple things. The main thing it tells me is that voice can be trained. We don't have to just let that voice run rampant in our heads. When we're making this sovereignty shift and recognizing that we have a right to be in charge of our lives, to be in charge of our mental capacity, to be in charge of our emotions, to be in charge of our actions and what we do. We have a right to our dreams. We sit in sovereign control of all of that, ourselves along with our Creator. And making that shift takes you from that people-pleasing personality that is just so prevalent in people that have executive function challenges, right? That executive shame, that's really what it's all about. You start feeling ashamed when you make a mistake, when you miss an appointment, when you make a typo, when you forget something that you should have remembered. Ooh, lightning, thunder. When you make a mistake, that executive shame comes in strong. And a lot of times what it sounds like is they're going to think bad of you. It's always coming from the standpoint of something's wrong. Why did you make that mistake? You're a bad person. You're making yourself look bad. What are they going to think about you? They're going to think this, they're going to think that. And so it sort of shifts your authority from yourself to other people. And so it's been really good having that come back around to me. And the thing that you have to remember is that if you're going to be a creative person and be a big thinker and get big jobs done, you have to get comfortable with displeasing people. You have to get comfortable with being in the sovereign seat of your life. You have to get comfortable with being able to say no. And being able to say no without a guilty conscience. Because I know we can all say no, but then you got to spend the next 3 days feeling guilty about it. It's almost like I should have just said yes. I would have had it done by now, and I wouldn't have had to deal with this guilty conscience. Because saying no and still feeling guilty, that's still going to drain your creativity and your mental capacity. You have to learn how to say no and set the boundary and then feel good about it. Because that's where the freedom lies. That's where the freedom lies. So understanding that sovereignty is not selfishness. It is your responsibility. You know, when you realize and when you begin to appreciate the fact that we were all given a purpose here. We all have a journey. And once you connect with your purpose and with your journey, what that thing is that brings you joy, it's a lot easier to stay focused, for one. It's also a lot easier to realize that that thing is bigger than your need to please other people. That purpose becomes bigger than your fear of criticism. So it's almost as if you have to figure out what that purpose is first, and then establish your sovereignty in your life. Because a lot of times if you don't connect with your purpose, it's real hard for people like us to not be people pleasers and to not get ourselves into that whole executive shame, right? Because a lot of times we're doing things that we really don't enjoy. We just sort of wandered into it and we're trying to make it work. But it is something that is very difficult because it doesn't use any of our gifts and our strengths. But we're just feeling like we got to do it because we said we would, or what else is there that we can do? So a lot of the foundation work that you have to do is to have to really begin to understand who you are. Know what your strengths are. Know what your challenges are. Know what you value. Know what you enjoy. Know what you don't like. And then try to figure out if there are ways that you can monetize that. And if you can't monetize it, then are there ways that you can do that as a hobby so that you have that as something fun that you enjoy doing that brings a lot of success to you in terms of feeling good about yourself and having a network of people that support you and think you're doing a great job. That's easier to accomplish if you're doing something that your natural strengths lead you towards, right? So I guess that's kind of what I'm on today, is that idea that we have to lock in to our sovereignty and not feel like it's selfish. We have to lock into that purpose that we were put here for, understanding what that thing is that we really want to do and enjoy doing. And then when we figure that thing out, defend the time and the boundaries so that we have the space and the energy to funnel towards it. And for everybody that's got that big dream, that big goal, you got to do that. You have to, because Thomas Edison, the guy that invented a light bulb, he was not doing it by being distracted and helping out this person, helping out that person, and solving that problem over there. He had to dial it in. He had to dial it in. You know, Mark Zuckerberg, all of them, Elon Musk, all of the, masters of industry, those people that have done notable work. I mean, you may not have a vision that is as large as that, but whatever big vision that you have, you're going to have to figure out how to dial it in and lock it in and focus and not be distracted, not be given into people pleasing. Recognizing that you have a right to your sovereignty, to your emotions, to your time, to your mental capacity, and you have every right and responsibility to defend that. So a polite decline, and if you're like some people, you could just say no, and no is a complete answer. But I will be honest, when I say no and try to make that a complete answer, my brain just sort of self-destructs. I almost have to have a reason that I can share with them. And you know what? I realize that's okay. That's how my logical brain works, because my brain says, well, you just can't say no. You have to have a reason. My brain is very logical like that. So I give a reason. I give a very brief reason. Oh, I'm not able to do that right now. I've got so many things going on my plate right now, so many projects that I have got to get finished before, I get back to August. Before August comes, I've got all these big projects, and that's really where my focus has to be. So I've given a reason. I've set my boundary. I feel like it's logical. I feel like it's pleasant. And then I can feel good about it, and that ringmaster can continuously be on my side. But you figure out how you need to respond in those situations. I realize everybody's different. Just remember that being sovereign and standing in your authority to guard your projects and your mental capacity, that's not being selfish. That's being right. And that's all I got for you guys today. I'm going to sit here and enjoy this rain and finish working on my projects. And maybe a little bit later on, I'll let myself read a book. I've got 2 great books that I'm reading, and I'll tell you about them next time. But I joined a book reading club. And so I have 1 book to read for that. But then I also have another book to read that I'll tell you guys about a little later. But I'm excited about both books. Really excited about the second book, though. And I'll tell you why when I get to that. But yeah, so that's what my day is going to be about. I hope you have a wonderful plan for your day. And I'll see you next time. Bye.